So the last presentation in the morning session from the Keio University, the Faculty of Science and Engineering, the Professor MORI would like to give us the presentation on the recent advances in hydrate-based energy technology and overview. Thank you very much. My name is MORI from the Faculty of Science and Engineering. Today, I am going to talk from this wide perspective. And for those of you who are participating today, I'm sure there are other people who have been involved in the research of the hydrate for long years. But on the other hand, this name, hydrate, you may have heard of the word, but some of you may not know about this well. So in my presentation, well, of course, there has been the mentioning of the words such as a class rate and hydrate, but I would like to start explaining what is the class rate hydrate, the definition, and also how the crystal structure has been made, or for the class rate hydrate, what kind of research and studies have been taking place, the history, and why now we are taking attention to class rate hydrate. And also, especially for the application for the energy and technology, what kind of expectation that we have and what have we done so far is something that I would like to cover today. So, once again, what is class rate hydrates? I'm wondering to talk about this because the other lecturer has already made a presentation, but I would like to go from this. So there are these class rate hydrates. That it has this structure of the class rate compounds and hydrate, and there will be another molecule that comes in, and this situation is something that we call the class rate hydrate. But we also have the hydrate on the other hand. And this is also compounds with the water and the other matters. And there is this overlapping area. That is where we call the class rate hydrates. The water molecule is forming the compounds, and the oxygen or methane, the other matter had been added on. So this class rate hydrates is something that we call hydrate in a simple way. So when you hear the word hydrate, which is a theme for today's forum, this would include on this left-hand side as well. So what's the structure? This is the model, and there are those water molecules and other molecules, and we call the water molecules as host, and we call something that comes inside as guest. So this gas actually is coming into this structure. And this kind of cage structure we call cage or cavity. And for example, if the gas is the methane, then that we should call this as a methane hydrate instead of saying the class rate hydrates with the methane gas. So, as Keio mentioned, the methane hydrate dug out from a marine sediment or from the permafrost. So it's from the nature. And this is the photograph of the methane hydrate dug out from the marine sediment. And you see the sand and also the hydrate that's there. And we can also synthesize this in laboratory. And this is a part of the photograph that we had actually formed in our lab, and we put 3.9 megapascal of the pressure. And here you see this wide area and this liquid layer, and this is the methane hydrate. And on the top, at the glass window, you see those dripping attached, and the methane has been compounded and form the hydrate. So we can artificially form, but whether it's artificial or natural, the methane has been added as the gas, then it's a methane hydrate. So what's the history behind who first discovered class rate hydrate? Actually, it's very difficult to define who is the first person. But in 1779, there was Joseph Priestley, who was the theologian, and also he was a natural philosopher who had been actively involved in the society, but he also was a political theorist. So he might have discovered a class rate hydrate of SO2 or SO3. We do not know precisely, but he is said to be the first person. And what's been recorded was that in 1728, Sir Humphrey Davy had made a lecture on the Royal Society in UK. And on the following year, in 1811, on the philosophical transactions, the paper was published. And Michael Faraday, who had been studied or learned upon the Sir Davy, he had actually came up with a composition of chlorine hydrate of Cl2 and 10H2O. So this is more or less 100 years ago. And we can say that this year is 200th year of the founding of the class rate hydrates. And this is the first page of the paper that you can actually see. And it's being stored. So in the beginning of 1800, the chlorine hydrate had been found. And what we call the laboratory curiosity in English. Perhaps these are some weird kind of the matter that you can find in the lab. And then after more than 100 years, it has a first time to get the contact with the technological issue. And in 2000, there has been the pipeline open in the Europe or US. And sometimes there were some blockings and obstruction. It may made the explosion. And that may be because of the vapor in the pipeline or the liquid on the lower area of the pipeline, so that it gets a hydrate crystallization and it made the blocking on the pipeline. So after 100 years of founding this class rate hydrate, the hydrate and the actual technology, especially the thermodynamic theory, made the contact. And in 2000, in the late 20th century, there has been advancement of the experiment syntax. And also there is this structure H. Unlike the structure 1 or 2, which was found by Dr. Wittminster, and also the Dr. Ingleso's hydrate growth model had been announced. And in 1990, there has been also the other hydrohydrate, and the basic experiments and study had been advanced. However, even now, in Europe and the US, the main activities related to dehydrate is how they can tackle with the blocking obstruction of the pipeline. And this photograph is show of the multi-phase flow in the experimental facilities. But starting from 1934, there has been an issue of the natural gas pipeline blocking, and that's because of the hydrate. So how we can resolve or how we can avoid had been studied so far. However, in Japan, we do not have the pipeline, almost none, in the large scale. So we do not see the blocking of the natural gas pipeline. But rather, what it has been the topic by the media, the methane hydrates from the ocean. As Gil mentioned. But my topic today is not about that. So whether there's a natural hydrate or even though we don't want it, there would be lots of the hydrate formation in the pipeline. That's not what I want to talk. I would like to rather talk about the new technological innovation on how we can proactively be utilizing the hydrate. And there has been an engineering studies taken place from the late 20th century. And in the coastline, there's no salt, so we actually study about the desalination of the seawater. And also using the nighttime power, we try to develop on the heat pump cooling storage system and form the hydrate at nighttime, and in the daytime we dissolve it and use for the cooling system. And in 1990s, as it was mentioned, we have the CO2 issues and the hydrate from the ocean, or how we should store and transport the natural gas, which will be discussed in the afternoon session by Mitsui Ship Engineering. And also from the 2000s, we are going over for the commercialization, but utilizing the hydrates slowly. They have the heating, storage, and air conditioning system, or for the gas separation, or for the hydro storage, or to have the high efficiency freezing system. So some of these are commercialized, but other than those, in any case, there's no success case commercially, not so far. And some of them actually have to discontinue. So even though there's no result, why we are taking attention to the hydrate? So why hydrates? When they are forming or dissociating and gasifying, there is no chemical reaction that comes along. Therefore, the gas substance can be kept as it is. For example, from the natural gas from the Southeast Asia, small and medium scale oil field, and they can actually change the GLT, convert into GLT, and to transport. So as an energy quantity, it would be decreased. And they have the reaction, so they have the byproduct. But in case of the hydrate, we do not have the byproduct. And the other thing is that, as you have seen on the crystallization structure, we can actually capture each molecules into each separate cage. And that may be linked to a new technological innovation. So now I would like to share with you on each item. One is the storage and transport of the natural gas. I'm sure the Mitsui Engineering Shipbuilding will be discussing later in the afternoon. But as an idea, it's quite old. In 1940s, the gas company people had come up with this idea of hydrate storage of natural gas. But for the past 50 years, there has been no attention to this, and there is no publishing of the literature or the paper. But in 90s, after 50 years, there has been this topic of hydrate storage of natural gas at last. And with what pressure and conditions for 2 degrees Celsius and 3 megapascal, for Mitsui, I'm sure they have a higher pressure, but if they put that pressure, then we can form the hydrate. And how much storage we can? It's 150 times of its volume for the storage. When we say 150 times more, it may be not too high. For LNG, you can have 600 times. And so in terms of the density, it's not that much. However, we do have some benefits that I mentioned earlier, that there's no erosion of the energy amount and there's no byproduct. And this is something that we, Keio University, had been involved with Tokyo Electronic Companies and research in NHI and IIST. This is a development of a hydrate-based refrigeration system. And we are still doing for the fundamental studies, but the details should be explained by Professor Omura in the afternoon session. For example, for household air conditioning system, currently they're using the vapor compression type of the heat pump. So we are compressing the working fluid and we adjust up by the high pressure or low pressure for the air conditioning. But we would like to take that over with the hydrate, forming and dissociating. And in a certain condition, we were able to get a very good COP. And also, for the past 10 years, we have been discussing on this hydro storage. In a way, it might be some kind of fever that has been made, but from the mid-90s, we will be able to store the hydrogen into the hydrate. The hydrogen has a very small molecule, so they cannot store one into one cage. So we were thinking that we may not be able to come up with a hydrogen hydrate. However, in a certain cage, maybe we can store 2 or 4 in the form of the cluster. And in 2002, the group in Chicago had published this that it can be stored hydrogen like this. But then they have to put 2,000 megapascals, so it's quite high. And it would not be feasible in a practical way. So with a lower pressure, can we get the hydro storage within the hydrate? There has been active studies going on, but when it wouldn't be that much as the Chicago group had made, and especially when we try to store them with a 1 megapascal, then we would have less probability. And why we have been working on this that much? That one is that the U.S. Department of Energy had the expectation that it can be the onboard fuel. And the objective or target to 2015 under a certain conditions to achieve to this level. So currently, several technologies has been shown on this chart and where they stand. And this is where the hydrate stands around here. So ideally, to be on the cage, it should be around here. So, well, this is my personal opinion, but perhaps it might be not possible for the onboard fuel. But rather, not for the onboard fuel for the vehicle because it has more stricter conditions, but to be utilized for the other application, which the Keio University is also involved in this program. So on the ground or underground, not the movable, but some of the stable storage should be taking place for the hydrates. And at this moment, on the Keio Industrial Complex, they can produce about 3,000 square meter metric per day, and to store this for 3 months. And we would like to establish this kind of plant, and that hydrate should be stored underground. And we came up with a concept design. And this is the diagram of the hydrogen hydrate. Well, this is quite rough, but we also had a more detailed concept chart. And we also had published these lectures, the literature and the paper in US, and we are now currently developing on the papers for the storage facility. And well, lastly, this might be the topic related to the Keio University. But I have told you that we can store the hydrate of one molecule to each. So utilizing that feature, we would like to have the ozone hydrate N to be stored. As you may know, the ozone has a very strong oxidization and the disinfection power, so we can sterilize the tap water or the food preservation, especially for like sashimi in Japan, these local fish. And also for the disinfection of the medical equipment or for the production of semiconductor devices. However, we have to do the ultraviolet irradiation or silent discharge and electrolysis. And those formed ozone hydrate in the atmosphere, it would immediately be dissolved into the oxygen. So even though we have no burden on the environment, it will be very difficult for the storage. So we have to form in the facility where they have these functions and to be used at the site. However, this ozone molecule, even though it says methane, instead of this, we would like to put this on O2. So that each molecule has been separated, so it would not be reacting each other. So this is the photograph of the hydrate contains ozone. And when we created, the color would be blue. Normally, if it's the hydrate, I'm sure some of you had seen it, but it's a very white, opaque kind of color. But this one has a blue color. At the lunchtime, or Mitsui Engineering and Shipbuilding, they are exhibiting the hydrate pellet, but from Keio University, we also would like to exhibit the blue hydrate containing the ozone. I think I'm running out of time, so I'm skipping some slides. And this is a quite recent study result. The ozone and oxygen and CO2 added hydrate, and within this, we had actually captured 0.1 mass percent of the ozone. And for minus 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, for 1 to 4 weeks without losing concentration, we can store this. So you may think it's just 0.1 mass percentage. But to store the ozone, there is this ozone water that's been on market. For several hours to one night, it can be stored. And so this ozone dissolved in this ozone water, this is hundreds or 1,000 times. It's quite high concentration. So there might be this kind of way of storing. And the paper for this result, it has been put on online. So if you're interested, please take a look at them. And the conclusion, the summary, might be my personal thinking. But as for the research development for hydrate, the basic research is still progressing, but the technology also is progressing at the same time. So this gap between this is quite small. So they already established a certain technology academically, and so it should be applied to the other technology. But in case of hydrate, even the basic research is still something going on. So when we develop the technology, always we need to take care on how the most advanced basic research is at the moment. So in that sense, it's quite important to have the partnership and the cooperation between the technological development and the basic research. And once again, there's no chemical reaction for hydrate forming and dissociate hydrate, so there's no byproducts, and we also can be able to store. So in that sense, we will be able to come up with a symbiotic and safe energy storage and utilization system. So this is it for my presentation. Thank you very much.
どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. So with this, we would like to conclude the 4 presentations in the morning session. We hope that you have a better understanding of the outline of the hydrates. For hydrates, the basic research and the technological innovation have been taking place hand in hand and concurrently. So in the afternoon, we would like to cover on the latest topic in each field, and the person who is in charge would actually be talking about their research results. So please look forward to it. With that, we would like to conclude the morning session. Thank you very much.